Okay, I'm going to be doing a video here showing you the thought process that goes into looking for tuna on your own boat. The example I'm going to use is a trip on Saturday where I actually caught nothing and never even saw an actual tuna. But I think it's a really good example because it's easy enough for me to go, hey, I went out here and caught this. This is how you do it. But when it comes to tuna fishing, success is one measure of, hey, I caught them, I found them. But what happens when you don't find them? How can you quantify your success then? Are you looking everywhere you should be looking? Did you drive past them? Did you not look at anything? So basically what I'm going to be showing you is how to go through your day and be confident that you've covered all the water that is in the area where there might be fish. So you don't go out there, go where they bit yesterday, not catch anything, and then hear that the guys got them somewhere else today. So let's switch over to the computer and take a look. Okay, here's basically a map of the southern end of the Southern California Bight here. While there haven't been a ton of tuna up here this year, there's been enough to target for the last month or so for private boaters. We're fishing out of Newport and Long Beach, so we're coming up out here about the top where the counter support is. This fish has been around for about a month, and it started out down by the border, inside the 43, above the corner there. About a month ago, we caught a mix of yellowfin and smaller bluefin, kind of between the 182 and the 289. Here's the 182. Here's the 289. We were caught in this general area. The following weekend, we went back up down there and found some 75 to about 100-pound fish in the same area, maybe a little bit closer to the border and down by the 43. And then the following week, we saw those same fish down outside of the 43, down this way. But we didn't catch any of that day, so we decided to just not go tuna fishing anymore until something straightened out. The following week, we went up to San Clemente Island to fish bass at Gold Bluff. And as we were fishing there, we saw the, 100-pound or less bluefin again, and ran out there and caught one. These are not the same big bluefin they're catching on the backside of the island, those 200 and 300 pounders. This is just different schools of fish. And we caught that fish Saturday. There was a lot of fish there, but I guess on Sunday the water rolled and got cold and green. Based on that, I was, when making plans to fish last weekend, Decker and I decided we were going to go to Catalina and look there because last year at this almost exact time there was fish on the front side of Clemente. The water rolled and those fish pushed up and into Cat Canyon. That was on Tuesday we were talking about. On Wednesday, fish were caught on the west end backside of Catalina. Bluefin hooked and lost, and also at least one or two caught. So that confirmed that those fish were probably, they were absolutely up there and probably be a good area to look at. But later in the week on Friday, I got a report that someone had seen some bluefin off the east end of the island as well. So the decision has to be made: where are you going to start? Where are you going to go? What are you going to look at in this situation? The fish that were caught at the west end of Catalina were caught really tight to the island. They came in, 200 or 300 feet of water right up against the island. And the spot where they were caught, if you look at the topography here, there's no reason that bluefin should be there. So basically there was some bluefin running along this ridge here, and they cornered some bait up against the island and they went tore it up, which is very similar to what happened at Clemente the week before for us. But like in Clemente, the fish that were up on the beach was a small percentage of the bigger volume we saw outside once we got off the island. There's really not a whole lot off the island here at the west end. It's just a drop-off. But there is a very promising canyon down here, and that, at least last year, really had the bluefin in there pushing bait up, and just tons and tons of bluefin. And I got a little video of that here.
Yeah, this is what we're not stopping on. Yeah. You know you've had enough. Look at these things. There's a lot of big tuna right here.
Another guy.
Are they? You want to catch one?
Catch one. He's only like 60 pounds.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I like them apples. Oh, there's a nice one.
Throw the surface iron at him.
Throw your hard bait. Oh, well, that one just jumped. How about that, huh?
So, based on that, running directly to this spot wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because that's the spot that the tuner are likely not going to be again if we get there. Whereas the Cat Canyon here would be a much more promising destination to look at. But these bluefin have been coming up on the tides every day. Well, every time they come up, they're usually on a tide. On Saturday, there was a morning tide, early morning tide, and then there was a tide around 12:30 p.m. The early morning tide was kind of a waste because it's a little early in the day for these bluefin to pop up. They haven't been popping up really before 10 o'clock at all. So a 7:30 or 8 o'clock tide is not really going to give me a good indication of what's going on. But it will give me enough of an idea of bait and other things like that so I can put myself into a place that's a higher percentage area for the 12:30 tide, which I'm hoping the bluefin will come up and bite. So, based on the information given, a lot of guys would make the run from, and this line starting over here in Newport Beach, running up past the west end of Cat directly to where the fish were caught. Well, that sounds good if you get there and they're biting. What are you going to do if they're not biting? So you get to this spot where there were fish caught, and there's not really any reason those fish should be there. What do you do at that point? You get there, you say it's 8 o'clock in the morning, just got off the morning tide, you don't see any fish, you don't see any birds, no bait. Where do you go at this point? You just wait around and hope that they're going to pop up? You can go wander off here somewhere and think, well, maybe they were whatever, but the biggest problem is you can see these contour lines and a lack of them out here. Contour lines organize things. They make currents run a certain direction. They aggregate bait. They do things like that. Once you get away from there, this becomes a giant haystack you're looking for a very small needle in if you're looking for a school of tuna. You might stumble upon them, but the chances are once you get away from the contours on a bank or an island, you're going to have to get really lucky to find anything at all. So, driving directly to a spot like this and just waiting or hoping that something's going to pop up when you get there is pretty bad because a lot of other guys that heard that's there too are going to be right there as well. So, rather than do that, I did a course that covered both areas of where fish were seen that week. And when I'm going offshore, if I have time, I don't drive by anything without looking at it. So launching out of Newport, instead of running straight to the island, I bent it down and took a look around the 14-mile bank. Maybe find a sleeper marlin in the morning, maybe some kelp patties with dorado or yellows, who knows. We got time, nothing's happening. It's 6:30 in the morning, we've got mackerel in a tank and a marlin casper just in case. We don't have to be anywhere until 12:30 for that tide, so there's no reason to hurry. After giving the 14 a look, we ran down to approximately 3 or 4 miles below where those bluefin were seen the previous day, and then ran up the island, up the ridge, Catalina Ridge, towards them. While we didn't see any tuna, we saw a lot of bait and mackerel and birds and a lot of life here where this first star is. It looked fishy. The water was off color, but it was 72, 73 degrees, so the tuna this year and every year have not been really concerned about green water. So we kind of remembered that spot and said, hey, this is something we can come back and look at on the tide. Not the alpha spot I would want to look at, but it's something to fall back on. So after leaving there, I continued up along the drop-off here, along this edge. And this is, if you guys have seen my other videos, this is where kelp patties will line up and everything like that. The current was horrendous on this lower part of the island. We could barely go 10 miles an hour until we got up almost to Farnsworth Bank, ripping uphill current into the swell. But as we started to get up there, the water was green and warm, but once we got about halfway up, we hit almost a 2-degree temp break, maybe a little over 2 degrees. It was 69 degrees. It went to very blue, and we immediately started seeing a lot of dolphins, birds, and things like that. So we looked real hard through the area, hooked it around Cat Canyon, ran all the way inside to the depth range where those fish were seen, but all we saw was dolphins, birds, and bait. So it's about 9:30 at this point. We continue up on through the area where the fish were caught, and it was a dead zone. It wasn't even worth looking at. So we got off the west end of the island. We glassed out. You know, you can glass 3 miles plus if you got gyros. So you don't need to run too much past the island to get an idea. We looked at the 125, which is our bank out there. Didn't see anything. So now it's about 11 o'clock. We have an hour and a half to the tide. The sign we saw in Cat Canyon was the best sign we saw. So we made the run back down there and spent a lot of time driving around that area, almost 40 minutes. And that's a lot of time for that small of an area, considering we're glassing 2 or 3 miles off each side of the boat. The dolphins dried up. I don't know where they went. They took off. There was still some bait there. We did not mark any fish. And the biggest difference we saw was that there was no shearwater birds anywhere around. And the tuna, for the most part, for us over the last 3 years, have always had, the ones that come up and bite anyway, have had shearwater birds sitting on them. And one of the ways to find them is you drive over where the shearwaters are and you mark underneath them and you can find tuna. It looked good, but it just didn't look fishy at all. So with that scrap, we decided to continue back down to our old thing. And again, I ran the same contour line, hoping to maybe stumble across something. We marked some bait schools along the way. We glassed around to the outside. We gave it a good look, but we never found anything. And we went back down and we covered the entire area where we'd seen the bait and birds in the morning. And the marlin guys were there too, and there was actually 2 or 3 marlin caught in that same zone while we were there. We weren't lucky enough to see any. We weren't trolling, so it wasn't very likely we were going to hang one. But we fished that through the tide and never really saw anything come together. It looked very fishy, but not for tuna. So we decided to call it a day at 12:30, but before we did, we ran down to the end of the ridge to the 277 to keep it honest. And as we ran down the ridge, the further we got, the less sign we saw. So we knew we were driving away from the fishy zone and there was no reason to continue going. And then we vented back up to the 14 to take one last look and saw nothing, and then went back to the harbor. Now, while we didn't catch anything, we covered all the fishable water around Catalina very well, and no fish were caught that day. And we were confident when we left that we did not drive past the tuna, we did not run one over. We never saw any sign of fish at all. And we felt comfortable. You know, we ran like 138 miles round trip, which is a lot of mileage when you're just running from Newport to Cat. But we did have to cover all the water we could. And if you go back to the thing that most guys do where they drive out there, you know, if you're out here and you're looking here and there's tuna down here, you're never going to know it. So it's best to say, you know what, I have X amount of time. Let me look at before the tide, see what I see, and then have spots to go back and look at on the tide, and then go out and cover any extra things that I might have missed or follow any sign. And while you're doing that, more often than not, you're going to at least have a better odds of finding fish than the average guy who just goes to where the fish are. So like any other kind of fishing, try and make a story that works for why fish are where they are and where else they might be. Make some educated guesses. Put yourself there in the right time of day. Look for the conditions. Look for birds, bait, fish, all that. And more often than not, you're going to be successful. And if you aren't, you'll know for sure that there was no fish around. It's not that you missed them or somebody else is going to find them a half mile away. If you look everywhere that they should be and you don't find them, you can go home with a clear conscience that they're just not around that day. So there you go. Finding tuna on your own boat.